The distress call. The teasery star wind drifted through the void like a silver leaf caught in an ocean current. Its sleek hull reflected the pale light of distant stars, every curve designed for peace, not war. Inside, the Tashari research team worked in quiet harmony, scientists cataloging nebula data, children playing in the habitat rings, families sharing evening meals under soft bioluminescent panels. Dr. Vess stood at the bridge viewport, her feathered crest rising and falling with each slow breath. Behind her, Sensor Officer Kiln adjusted his console, humming an old Tashari lullaby under his breath. This was supposed to be a routine survey mission. Nothing more than the alarm screamed, "Contact!" Kiln's voice cracked. 4 vessels dropping out of jump space directly ahead. Vess spun toward the viewport. 4 angular shapes materialized from rippling distortions in space, their hulls scarred and patchwork, bristling with weapon ports. Shack raiders, pirates who valued prey over profit, cruelty over commerce, evasive maneuvers, Vess ordered, but her voice felt hollow. The Starwind had no weapons, no shield strong enough to matter. They were a research vessel, a floating library, not a fortress. The first impact rattled the ship. A plasma lance tore through the port stabilizer, sending sparks cascading across the bridge. Kiln was thrown from his seat. Emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. "Hull breach on deck 4, someone shouted. "Sealing bulkheads." Vess's hands trembled as she gripped the command rail. Through the viewport, the shack cruisers advanced in formation, predators circling wounded prey. She thought of the families below, of researcher Pell's daughter, barely 6 cycles old, who'd shown her a drawing that morning. A picture of stars, another impact. Closer this time. The lights flickered. "Dr. Vess," Kiln's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to call for help." Help, the word felt absurd. They were deep in uncharted space, far beyond any patrol route, any established lane. The nearest Tashari outpost was 3 days away at maximum jump. The nearest anyone was. Vess closed her eyes. "Send the Class 9 distress call. All frequencies. Maximum broadcast, Class 9, the universal code." A cry for help so desperate it transcended politics, borders, species. It meant, "We are dying. Anyone who can hear us, please." Kiln's fingers danced across his console. The signal burst outward in every direction, a ripple of electromagnetic desperation expanding at the speed of light. And then, silence. Just the creak of damaged bulkheads, the hiss of venting atmosphere, the distant sobbing of someone in the corridors below. The shack vessels held position, weapons charging. They weren't in a hurry. They knew no one was coming. Vess opened her eyes and looked at her crew, at Kiln with his broken arm, at young Tess clutching her datapad, at all the faces she'd come to know like family. "I'm sorry," she whispered. A third impact split the hull. Alarms wailed. Fire suppression systems engaged with a roar of chemical foam. Vess held onto the rail as the deck tilted beneath her, and then, impossible, Kiln gasped. "Doctor." "I have a response." Vess's head snapped toward him. "What?" "A response to our distress call, incoming transmission." His crest rose in disbelief. They're jumping in. Right now." On the sensor display, a new signature blossomed into existence. Small. A single vessel, no larger than a shuttle compared to the shack cruisers. But it was between them and the raiders now, positioning itself like a shield. The transmission crackled through the bridge speakers. A human voice, calm and steady despite the impossible odds. "Teasery Starwind, this is Terran Navy vessel Dependable. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Help has arrived." Vess stared at the viewport. The tiny ship hung in the black, outgunned 4-1, outnumbered, outmatched. And yet it didn't retreat. It didn't hesitate. Kiln's voice trembled. "They came. The humans. They actually came." Vess felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Something she thought had died when the shack first appeared. Hope. "We answer aboard the TNV Dependable." Commander Elena Rohr stood at her command station, eyes locked on the tactical display. 4 shack cruisers glowed red on her screen, their weapon systems hot and ready. Behind them, the crippled Starwind listed in space, trailing debris and atmosphere. Her crew stared at her, waiting. "Commander," said Lieutenant Chen from Tactical, his voice tight. "We're reading 80+ hostiles. They've got us on tonnage, firepower, and numbers. Regs say we should wait for reinforcements." Elena didn't look away from the screen. "How long until the nearest Terran patrol arrives?" 43 minutes. She thought of the families on that research vessel. 43 minutes, a lifetime when death was measured in seconds. No, she said quietly. We don't have 43 minutes. They don't have 43 minutes. Chen leaned forward. Commander, Lieutenant. Elena's voice was steel wrapped in silk. When did you join the Terran Navy? He blinked. Ma'am? When did you join? Why? Chen hesitated, then straightened. Because Terran Navy ships don't abandon people. Because we answer the call. Elena nodded slowly. That's right. We are the Terran Navy. When someone cries out in the dark, we answer because that's who we are. Not because it's easy. Not because it's safe. Because it's right. She turned to her helmsman. Ensign Okoye, bring us about. Put us between the Starwind and those raiders. Yes, Commander. The Dependable pivoted with surprising grace for a warship. Its hull barely 200 meters long. A corvette designed for patrol and escort, not line combat. But it moved with purpose, sliding between the wounded research vessel and the pirate fleet like a parent shielding a child. Elena opened the wideband channel. Shack vessels. This is Commander Elena Rohr of the Terran Navy. You are hereby ordered to stand down and withdraw immediately. The vessel you are attacking is under our protection. Silence, then laughter, harsh and grating, echoed through the bridge speakers. A Shack voice dripping with contempt. One ship? You send one ship? Foolish Terran. You die with them. The lead Shack cruiser fired. Evasive! Elena snapped. The Dependable rolled hard, but not fast enough. The plasma bolt clipped their starboard armor, scorching metal and sending tremors through the deck. Warning lights flashed. Shields at 60%, Chen called. They're targeting our reactor signature. Elena's jaw tightened. Return fire. Target their sensor arrays, blind them. And get me a firing solution on their engines. We don't need to destroy them. Just make them regret showing up. The Dependable's railgun spat tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. One Shack cruiser's sensor mast exploded in a shower of sparks. Another took a direct hit to its maneuvering thrusters and began spinning lazily. But there were still 4 of them. And they were angry now. Plasma lances and missile trails lit up the void. The Dependable danced through the firestorm, rolling, diving, firing in bursts. Elena's crew worked with practiced precision, but they were taking hits. Shield strength dropped. Hull plating buckled. The smell of burning circuitry filled the bridge. Commander, Chen's voice rose. Shields are down to 20%. We can't take much more. Elena stared at the tactical display. The Starwind was still there, damaged but alive, its crew still breathing. That was what mattered. Chen, she said calmly, how many torpedoes do we have left? 4, ma'am. Fire all 4. Full spread. Make them scatter. The torpedoes streaked outward, 4 brilliant points of light converging on the Shack formation. The raiders broke apart, dodging frantically. One torpedo detonated against a cruiser's hull, tearing a gash through its armor. And in that moment of chaos, Elena saw it. A window. A chance! Okoye, emergency burn! Put us right in their faces. The Dependable surged forward, engines screaming. It closed the distance in seconds, coming so close to the lead Shack cruiser that their hulls nearly touched. Elena opened the channel one more time. Her voice was ice. You want to kill them? You go through us first. And I promise you, we don't die easy. For the first time, the Shack hesitated. And far behind them, beyond sensor range, a fleet of Terran warships dropped out of jump space. Reinforcements, finally arriving. But by then, the Dependable had already held the line. Who we are, the reinforcements arrived like an avenging storm. 7 Terran Navy destroyers materialized from jump space, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. They formed a battle line with practiced efficiency, weapons hot, shields raised, every sensor locked onto the 4 Shack cruisers, still circling the battered Dependable. Captain Morris's voice crackled through the fleet-wide channel, deep and resonant. Shack vessels, this is Captain Jameson Morris of the TNV Relentless. You are outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. The Shack raiders didn't answer. They simply scattered, engines flaring as they burned hard for jump distance, abandoning their wounded prey. Within seconds, they vanished into the black, leaving only debris and scorch marks behind. Aboard the Dependable, the bridge crew erupted in ragged cheers. Lieutenant Chen slumped in his chair, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. Ensign Okoye wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands still trembling on the helm controls. Commander Elena Rohr stood silent at her station, watching the tactical display as the red contacts blinked out one by one. Her ship groaned around her, hull plating cracked, systems failing but still flying. "Still breathing?" "Commander," Chen said softly. "We did it." Elena nodded slowly. "Not yet. Get me a line to the Starwind." The channel opened. Static hissed, then cleared, and Dr. Vess's voice came through. Shaky, disbelieving, alive. "Dependable. This is Dr. Vess of the Teasery Starwind. We don't know how to thank you." Elena's expression softened. "You don't need to thank us, Doctor. Are your people safe?" Yes, we have injuries, but everyone is alive. Because of you." "Good." Elena glanced at her crew, at Chen with his bloodied knuckles from gripping his console too hard, at Okoye still blinking back tears of relief. "Doctor, we're going to escort you to the nearest safe port. Our medical teams will assist with your wounded. You're not alone anymore." There was a long pause, then Vess's voice thick with emotion. "Why did you come? You were so far away. You risked everything for strangers." Elena looked out at the stars, the endless black scattered with light, with worlds and lives and stories she would never know. And she thought of every distress call she'd ever answered, every frightened voice crying out into the void. "Because that's who we are," she said simply. "We're human, and when someone calls for help, we answer." Aboard the Starwind, the Tashari crew gathered in the observation dome. They watched as the Terran ships formed a protective formation around their vessel, small lights in the darkness burning steady and bright. Kiln stood beside Dr. Vess, his broken arm bandaged but forgotten. "I always heard stories about humans," he said quietly, "that they were reckless, violent, that they fought wars among themselves." Vess nodded. "All true, but they came anyway. One small ship against impossible odds." Vess turned to him, her crest rising slowly, a gesture of respect, of wonder. "Maybe that's what makes them human. They know the cost. They know the odds. And they come anyway." In the corridors below, researcher Pell's daughter pressed her face against a viewport, watching the Terran corvette limping alongside them. She clutched her drawing of stars, now creased and smudged from the chaos, and added something new with a stubby crayon. A small ship. Between the stars and the darkness, a shield. Aboard the Dependable, Elena stood alone in her ready room, staring at the damage reports scrolling across her screen. Hull breaches on 3 decks, shields offline, main cannon destroyed, half her crew injured. By every tactical metric, she'd made the wrong call. She'd risked her ship, her crew, her career, all for a vessel she'd never heard of, for people she'd never met. But when she closed her eyes, she saw them. The families on the Starwind. The children. The researchers who'd done nothing but try to learn, to explore, to live. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd make the same choice again. Every time, because that's what it meant to be human, not fearless. Not invincible, just unwilling to let someone face the dark alone. Far away, in 100 worlds across 1,000 systems, the story spread. The Tashari told it first, of the humans who answered a distress call no one else could hear. Of the tiny ship that held the line against impossible odds. Of the commander who said, "We answer, because that's who we are." Other species heard it. Some nodded knowingly. Others scoffed, calling it propaganda. But more than a few looked up at the stars and wondered, if I called out into the dark, would they come for me too? And somewhere, on a dozen Terran patrol routes, a dozen commanders received new standing orders. Class 9 distress calls take absolute priority. No exceptions, because humanity had learned long ago what it meant to cry out and hear no answer, and they'd sworn, on every ship, in every heart, that no one would ever feel that silence again. Not while humans still sailed the stars, not while there were still voices to answer the call.